I guess I'd start with, just the notion that we're living in the golden age of research on love.
Mm,
And yet it's also still among the most elusive things to embody or find completion in with regard to deep, intimate relationship with another person.
yeah.
So, and for me, as a forgiveness and genocide researcher, I feel like all the historical genocides, present genocides, and the ones into the future have to do with the breakdown and the fracture of the one-to-one love relationship at the foundation of everything.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Love, Loss, and Hallucinations. This week's guest, he is, wow, it's kind of hard to sum up because he has his fingers in many things, and I was just recently introduced to him myself. But I'll just give an intro now, and then we can go from there. And I can promise you this is going to be a very interesting conversation. Today's guest is Shann Ray, and Shann is a Czech American artist, social scientist, and American Book Award winner who teaches leadership and forgiveness studies at Gonzaga University, as well as poetry at Stanford. He is a National Endowment for the Arts Fellow and a Group Fulbright recipient to South Africa. Through his research in forgiveness and genocide, Shann has served as a visiting scholar in Africa, Asia, Europe, and the Americas, and as a poetry mentor for the PEN America Prison and Justice Writers Program. He is the author of a mere 17 books, and they span poetry to fiction to creative nonfiction. He is joining me today, and all of us listening, from Spokane, Washington, where he lives with his wife and I believe 3 daughters. Is that right, Shann?
Yeah, we got 3 daughters, but now two of them are in New York City and one's in LA. So it's Jen
Oh,
and I.
wow. Oh, empty nesters. There's some loss right
Yeah,
there.
that's right. That's
That is a
exactly right.
shift, I am sure. Well, I just want to do a quick shout out before we get started. Again, as I said, I just recently came across you as an author and you as your work, and I just want to give a shout out to Summer Stewart, who is the publisher of Unsolicited Press, who I had the good fortune of meeting at the Jackson Hole Writers Conference this last fall, actually. And based on my talks with her about what this podcast is about, what this memoir I'm trying to get published is about, she's like, "You need to talk to Shann." And
Awesome.
she yeah, she
Oh, Summer,
recommended.
Summer she's a bright light, Summer. I mean,
Yeah,
thankful for her.
yeah,
And Unsolicited Press is doing great things.
yeah. I've I hadn't heard of them either before that writers conference, and I've been following them, and I just love what they're up to, and like just their whole ethos and like going for it and putting out great
Yes.
works. And yeah, she suggested I read The Soul of Others, which I highly recommend. This came out in 2022, I believe.
Yeah.
Um, as I wrote you in my email, my highlighter got very tired as I was reading this book. So I feel like there's a lot to get into here that is along the lines of what this podcast is all about. So uh, with no further ado, I think I guess I'm wondering just to start, like, when you got this email, my email from this strange person you never heard of, and saw it, read what the themes were about and what I was, trying to do with it. Was there anything that first popped into your mind that you're like, oh man, I really want to talk to about this?
I think mostly it was just kind of enjoying what you're doing and seeing the way that you're moving
Mm,
deeper understandings of love into the world. And there's so many unique pieces to that are so enjoyable to talk about. And I guess I'd start with, just the notion that we're living in the golden age of research on love.
mm,
And yet it's also still among the most elusive things to embody or find completion in with regard to deep, intimate relationship with another person.
yeah,
So, and for me, as a forgiveness and genocide researcher, I feel like all the historical genocides, present genocides, and the ones into the future have to do with the breakdown and the fracture of the one-to-one love relationship at the foundation of everything.
mm, mm.
So, so yeah, so I that was mainly it. Just kind of noticing, oh, this is great how you're moving these things, Scott.
Well, thank you, thank you. Well, and I guess, yeah, I mean, I was thinking of starting with loss, but since you kind of started with love, let's start with love. And as you said, there's so many factors to it. And, I feel everyone on some level, whether aware of it or not, or whether they're trying to deny it and be the solo person out in the world, or, are trying to deepen a bond with someone they care about, whether it's a partner or a friend. Um, yeah, there's just so many elements to it. And um, I know you also work as a clinical psychologist. Is that right? Social
Yes,
scientist,
yeah.
clinical psychologist, and you certainly do a lot of work around that and research, I believe. Um,
Mhm.
and I guess I'm just wondering, where are you at now with what is authentic love?
Yeah, what a beautiful question. I mean, I always feel like there's the two major divides that are in a non-dual interweaving, and we might call that the rational and the mystery based. So circular based, the linear based. We
Mm,
might call it the masculine and the feminine. We might call it the industrial and the wilderness. You know,
hmm,
and there are just so many ways to frame it, the poetic and the scientific.
yeah.
And so for me, kind of living in those areas all these years, there's certain principles that are so profound to authentic love, like to whatever extent anyone cuts off the masculine within themselves is the extent to which they will do harm to themselves and others.
Mm,
To whatever extent any person cuts off the feminine in themselves is the extent to which they will do harm to themselves and others. So this notion of a unified feminine and masculine, or unified uh, reason-based logic and mystery-based logic, is
mm,
been profound and powerful from the beginning of time. And even if we look at, culturally matriarchal societies and patriarchal societies, they have different fault lines. You know, However, below it all, we could say that the major fault line is the cutting off of either the masculine or the feminine. And inside that cutoff, there's a certain type of fission, if we're talking about atomic theory, that's created, or
hmm
fracture. And inside reunification of the feminine and the masculine, in a loving, authentic way, across all dimensions, all intersectionality, all genders, all sexual orientations, all cultures and races. Um, that reunification, I would say, resonates with one's own self and body at the
mm,
deepest levels. So it doesn't make sense in life to think I should hate my mother, or I should hate my father, or I should hate my brother, or I should hate my sister. Whether I'm whatever version of masculine and feminine that I am. That just doesn't make sense.
I mean, say
uh,
a little more about that. How does that
yeah,
not make sense?
I mean, I think people think, come back to hallucination. Sometimes we all hallucinate that it makes sense, but
Mm,
in reality, I think there's much more evidence, whether it's scientific or poetic, whether it's reason-based evidence or mystery-based evidence, that unity with one's sister or brother
mm,
is more beautiful, more good, and more true than fracture or disunity.
yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean there aren't times that one may need to fracture with someone else or break apart from someone else due to, the nature of what I would call the nature of evil in the world, or the nature of disordered thinking or disordered patterns.
Trauma.
But we wouldn't call the disordered patterns the goodness, the beauty, and the truth of, which are the transcendentals, if we take from the Jesuits a little bit. And we also would not say, let's act like the Jesuits are the angels. They've certainly had all their own flawed patterns, just like great thinkers and seekers of all religious or non-religious persuasions. Atheists, Muslims, Christians, Buddhists, Taoists. You know, the so-called quote nuns of American life, NONE. You know,
Oh, right.
um,
Yeah.
the that we've always had people abusing what any deep tradition. Let's take the Cheyenne tradition, and the terminology for God is Maheo.
Mm.
Well, we've had people that are Cheyenne, and we've had people that are Czech, like my background. And we've had people of everybody else's background abusing the nature of beauty, goodness, and truth. But
That
but
they
that
have.
yes, but that doesn't take away the idea that there is beauty, goodness, and truth. That doesn't remove the actual central power of things like beauty, goodness, and truth. so so
Yeah.
that has been kind of a quest, a beautiful quest throughout the journey of love. So authentic love, I'd say, is to not get waylaid or set us into the fracture motif of life, the world around us, relationships, generational patterns,
Mm.
toxicity, trauma, etc. But to devote oneself humbly with appropriate surrender into the heart of love itself. And we would learn some of that from ourselves. We'd learn some of that from great mentors, and we'd learn some of that from the great wisdoms that have existed from the beginning, which we might call the divine. So,
Mm.
authentic love in research right now, it shows some really cool, very interesting and intriguing dovetails with ancient understandings of love.
Mm.
For example, 98% of society lives either mediocre or disaster lives around love.
That
So,
is
in a
a large
way,
percentage.
yeah, back to hallucinations. In a way, it is what we thought it was. It's much harder to achieve than one might think.
Hmm.
You know,
Yes.
due to everything, generational patterns, trauma, what we haven't healed from individually and collectively.
Hmm. I'd
Even
heard
this,
just quickly,
yeah, go ahead.
sorry to interrupt, but I heard I
No,
was
you're good.
listening to another podcast, and I think it was you who mentioned like, there's been research that like looking at people 200 years ago and the patterns they had and how that
Yeah,
like trickles down to
so
current
interesting.
generations, the whole generational trauma of it and like
Yeah,
overcoming that and those
yes,
those ideas and those
totally.
positions in
That's it.
society. Yeah.
And so there's so many reason-based things. Like if people want to look at the research on love, then the Gottman Institute would be the primary one worldwide and recognized as the primary one, which comes out of Seattle and John Gottman and the research teams that deeply scientifically looked at the nature of relationships. That disasters tend to have 8 to 10 negatives to every one positive,
Mm.
rolling consistently.
What
Mediocres
do you
are
mean by that?
yeah, it's called those interactions, those exchanges, 8 to 10 positive exchanges would be,
Oh, between two
yeah,
people.
yeah, would be like words, feelings, thoughts, um, motives, understandings, facial expression, body posture, voice
Mm.
tone.
Wow.
They happen about, you know, 30 to 50 every 5 minutes. So it can be measured, which is kind of amazing. That's one of the great gifts of the Gottman Institute is they were able to he studied for 2 years under facial expression master in France to get to be
Wow.
able to notice what are the destructors of love, of authentic love. And they came up with they call them the four horsemen of the apocalypse.
Wow. And you said what, 50% are that in 10
Oh
to
yeah,
1?
around 48 to 49 or that, 10 negatives to every one positive in general. And then mediocres and move up from disaster to mediocre, and it's 6 to 8 negatives to every one positive. And then you get into like the top 2%, 1% worldwide, again, across all intersectionalities. It's not
Hmm.
like just this or that type of couple makes it or something. It's people that have either committed to and learned the process, or they grew up in places that gave them that, families and generations. And like,
Mm.
so,
Yeah.
which is not surprising. Even if we just look at nations, I mean, nation states will have a gorgeous idea, but wow, they really get tugged down into the disaster so often. Any country, America included, any nation, native nations included, or any nation. Um, so the gorgeous idea, I think, is what in general we all hope for, and it really does represent authentic love.
Mm.
That said, it takes a lot of wisdom, mentoring, and devotion, surrender, and sacrifice to maintain it and build it into the next generations.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so the ones in the top 1% like that, they're 8 to 10 positive exchanges to every one negative exchange, even in conflict. So take for example, how often has anybody that you know or yourself named a fault, asked the other person how it made them feel, asked forgiveness, and built a mutual plan of change? Well,
Wow.
that's what
Say that
yeah.
again. Just
So let's take any relationship you're in or I'm in, or that our parents were in, or that our brothers and sisters or friends.
mhm.
How often have we ever seen two people notice their conflict exchange, notice their own faults in it, ask the other person, what was the impact on you, or how did it feel for you when I was rude to you with that rude tone of voice, or when I
Mm,
take it to extreme when my country committed genocide against your country. But
yeah.
everything in between. But when two parties got together, but again, let's keep it at the one to one, because I think that's the foundation of everything. It's kind of like the nucleus in atomic theory.
Mm,
Everything exists, towards either fission, fracture power, or fusion, unification power. You know, and of course,
mm,
fusion is multiple times more powerful than fission. In atomic theory. You know, and so similarly, we're based on that DNA with light, and the way we're created, or given. If people don't believe in creation, the way we're given to live, we're based on light. No one would be alive without light.
right.
And so, and no living thing would be alive without light. But of course, if delivered at certain angles, then the power of it is annihilating.
Mm,
Which is all back to the ancient traditions. Like, why can one not stare into the face of God?
mm.
Well, scientifically speaking, you might be annihilated. you know, and so there's therefore real reverence for light.
Hmm.
Many traditions. Let's take the Christian tradition. God is light. God is
Right.
love. You know, very interesting that light and love are associated. Which we also might say clarity or vision, or you the will to love. The authentic love, dreamscape made into an embodied reality between nation states, or between two people, or between many people. But yeah, so all just such interesting stuff.
It's fascinating.
So
Fascinating.
back to,
And
you'd asked about that forgiveness thing, which was so interesting. I never saw that until I was right 27. But when I
mm,
finally saw it, when somebody in the partnership, and maybe the two have agreed to this through mentoring or coaching, or how they're raised or whatever, they say, I mistreated you this way. Let's take a very simple one. My wife Jennifer, hey Jennifer, I just had a very rude tone of voice and acted like my thinking is better than your thinking. So I shoved a bunch of ego between us right there. Um, what was that like for you when I did that to you? And then just
mm,
listening, and then she might say, if you're in a loving relationship, the person will say, oh, thank you for noticing that. And, you know, yeah, it was painful to me. I like it when we're mutual, and I like it when we have a ground that's not sort of determined by inappropriate ego or power or self-seeking. She might say things like that, and then I might say, "Very good points. Will you forgive me for approaching our conflict, or our relationship there, with a lot of ego, a lot of power pushing, and rude tone of voice and rude statements."
yeah.
She might say, if we're in a good relationship, she'd say, "Sure, thank you." If I've never done that before in my life, she may be like, "What the h is this?"
What are you doing?
But
When I,
if mentoring and coaching allows people to kind of be in these mutualities, and then
yeah.
nobody's, if people change and create a new good ground over time, which 3 to 5 years for character change according to social science, um, then everybody trusts it, as time goes on.
Yeah.
But if they don't change, they keep harming each other. And if you just take the
Yeah.
levels, like
And
a
it's a
small
lot of
harm like
work.
that, yeah,
3 to 5 years. I mean, remembering
yeah,
to do that over 3 to 5 years is a lot of work. And
that's probably why we all need mentoring. It doesn't happen,
yeah.
out of
Yeah.
the blue or something. And probably why it's like anything. I mean, no one's going to have I lived my life as a basketball player and ended up playing in the Bundesliga in Germany. You know, no one's going to have high quality 3-point percentage by hoping they will.
Takes practice. Exactly. A
Yeah,
lot of
and
practice.
so
And
much.
and learning
Yes.
how to so
Oh,
my thing, which people
yeah.
listening to this, if they listen a lot, they know my thing is like, if I get triggered, I get defensive, and it's like, trying to catch yourself in that moment and
Yes.
not
That's
get
it.
all those
Yep.
chemicals like washing your brain and say, wait a second, how did that affect you? How are you feeling about it? Which I think my
Exactly.
wife would say I probably still have work to do.
Yeah, that's all good for all of us, right? And
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
build, there's so much nuance, because it's, even if we take the basketball example, one might practice a lot, and I've known a lot of people like that. And yet in the game, their percentage is not strong.
Mm,
So something there is psychological, spiritual, about confidence, and about
mm.
sort of belief, and
Yeah.
how
Well, and
one
I think it goes
carries.
back.
Yeah,
I think it goes back to
yeah,
like the masculine, feminine
Yeah.
wholeness and nurturing that wholeness within yourself so you can have the
Right.
confidence.
So you're in a game under high pressure. Of course, we got to experience it a lot of times, but or you're in your life as a marriage or a coupleship under high pressure, and you do the right thing confidently and in a way with grace and ease, like because of having been there so many times, having been mentored through it, and having the capacity. And of course, two people, if we're down to the one-to-one relationship, the foundation, doing that together. I mean, the other person will carry you quite often when I'm not quite doing the best way, or
Right.
or I will carry her, because you're in the trust of the authentic love, and you know that sometimes I'm not that great, and so she can help me
Well,
out,
and I'm interested, that I love that you brought up the whole feminine masculine
Yeah.
uh, part of this because, for me, that the concept of a feminine part, me being a male,
Yes.
that there is a feminine part of me, did not enter my consciousness till I was on a retreat when I was like 34. And I
Yes.
was like, what are
Awesome.
you talking about, man? A woman. It was
Right.
actually a
Right.
woman who told me
Yes.
this.
Exactly.
And I was just like, what do you even mean? So,
Yeah.
and I love that it's coming from you who, from reading
Yeah.
your work, you grew up in Montana, you're a hunter, you're like,
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
played pro basketball. You're not like the first kind of guy, I think, stereotypically, that would be coming
Right.
at telling people like,
Exactly.
oh, you need to explore your feminine.
This is so interesting, right? Because this is where science, I think, is so fascinating. Back to some reason-based things, and science is not just reason-based, right? The best science is both mystery and reason. You know what I mean? It's people of both feminine and masculine continuity researching things,
Mhm.
and so it's built both in qualitative and in positivistic or more reductionistic quantitative styles of research are paired with qualitative, more circular, less reductionistic styles of research. And so all of that is mirroring who we are, right? And whoever we're in coupleship with, meaning it's kind of fun to connect it all, like connect the dots. Like science isn't just out there floating around; it's coming from us.
Mhm.
Poetry isn't just out there like its own; it's coming from all of us. So, in its healthiest forms, what might it look like? It's kind of like if we take art or we take marriage or coupleship or basketball, one can't achieve what they don't have. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So if we want what's the most sustaining thing? Well, we know things from our own just personal experience. Like, well, healthy diversity is a lot more sustainable than singularity. You know what I mean?
Right.
Healthy listening to the feminine, if you tend to be over masculinized, is always better than blocking or non-listening. You know,
Mm.
and it's similarly if you're over feminized, and that in the research looks a certain way. The faults of the over expression of the feminine are contempt and criticism.
Mm.
Those are the two horsemen of the apocalypse. There, the major fault line of the masculine that's over masculinized is defensiveness and stonewalling. So you can see how they match. Like, did Jennifer have contempt for me out of her just her own self? Highly unlikely. Who did it first? Did I stonewall her first, or did she have contempt for me first? And
Mm.
those are the large expressions of, was I defensive first or was she critical first? You
Mm.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
And when we're talking about authentic love, who cares? Like, I need to change my whole thing. Like, it doesn't matter if I somehow had some what I would call false impression that she started it or something.
Right.
That's just ego speaking, right? And then also, Gottman, the research from that institute doesn't let us off the hook because we all have all four of the horsemen of the apocalypse. So I'm also, do a lot of criticism, which makes me be full of contempt, when I'm living that way, which
Mm.
makes her want to be defensive and return stonewalling. Even if the masculine tends to major in the stonewalling and defensiveness, it minors or double majors in contempt and criticism, similar
Yeah.
to the feminine. If we put that.
Yeah, and I
So
would
and then
say even our
yeah,
society right now, at least America,
yes,
maybe I'm not going to put the whole world, is very
sure.
masculine leaning.
Oh, we're in a major fascist cycle, which
Yeah.
historically happens over and over, and
Hmm.
that doesn't mean that the feminine is left off the hook or something. It's more like what feeds and evokes a fascist nation. All kinds of fracture between the feminine and the masculine. and the masculine
Mm.
and the feminine.
Hmm.
Like it's not, oh, those men are destroying the world. Yeah, there's part of that that's true. You know,
Yeah.
it's well, let's not forget that, there's a history of patriarchy and dominance that is hard to overcome, but it has been overcome. How does it get overcome? And then what part of the feminine evokes that? They're
Hmm.
not, so whatever I evoke in Jen, I'm not responsible for Jen's failures. She's not responsible for my failures, but we're responsible for how we evoke those failures.
Mm.
And that responsibility in a healthy, loving way gives, some real patterns of legitimate change that could happen right now. It's just that the cycles around the world right now are just happen to be highly, highly fascist because the typical generational pattern is people cry out after all kinds of warlike tendencies for peace. But if you don't change that actual generational shadow
Mm.
of warlike tendencies in all the families, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's gonna repeat, like usually 40 to 80 years later on a pretty typical cycle. So if we
And,
take Gaza right now and Israel, super dominance by Israel in
right.
a very painful way. They would say, of course, the ones that are moving that dominance did not come out of nowhere, you know.
Hmm.
And if okay, well, and that's what's so tricky about it all, so complex. But what the dominator is not recognizing so often is watch out for the children of that dominance that you dominated 40 and 80 years from now.
Yep.
And then 120 and 160 years from now, and then 1,000 years from now. You know what I mean? Like it's because the foundational one-to-one authentic love have not only not been solved, they've chosen, the dominator has chosen disaster relating and acting like it's somehow not disaster.
Right.
But
Right.
it is total disaster. So, and that's where we can borrow from people like Martin Luther King Jr. and his wife, Coretta Scott
Mm.
King, who, of course, was her own major force in her own right. The oppressor will never willingly give up power. Two great truths from them. The oppressor will never willingly give up power. It's the first one. So, we shouldn't sort of hope that it just will change or something. And then the second one, when we love the oppressor, we bring about not only our own salvation, but the salvation of the oppressor.
Mm.
Super revolutionary. And of course, MLK got a lot of that thinking from his own. He's the fourth in four generations of great pastors. Again, not they're perfect, not they don't have flaws, but they're seeking, the greater good. And okay, he got a lot of his learning on soul force from Gandhi, and Gandhi got a lot of his learning on soul force from Tolstoy. So it's all very interesting. And of
It's
course,
all very interesting.
where
And
did
yeah,
Tolstoy get his? Like it just always goes back. Probably from, like he comments a lot, from the mother figure.
yeah, yeah.
Interesting.
And as you said, it's been around and through these
Yes,
cycles and for
yes, forever.
years. Like it's funny because I'm looking at this statue behind me, this
Yeah,
black one, which is the Hindu god
yes,
Ardhana Rishvara, which is
yeah,
half male, half female. And
absolutely.
that's an ancient deity that's
Yep,
addressing this exact same thing about needing to bring that
exactly.
together. And
Yeah,
um, I just want to read this one quote around the feminine,
yeah,
and then maybe you can match it with a masculine, and
sure.
then we can sort of go back to the one-on-one and like what kind of steps if you're in a if we're on the
Yeah,
smallest level of one-on-one, what kind of steps can you take to like help
yeah,
move towards that wholeness? So this is Marion Woodman said this, and she's an analytical psychologist, Carl Jung fan, or not fan, but
yeah.
student, I guess.
Awesome.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah. And so she said, the feminine leads us to the sharp edge of experience. There we have to feel our feelings in our bodies. There our secrets become visible in the darkened, unvisited corners of our psyches. Claiming
mm.
the unsept corners of our psyches leads us to compassion for ourselves and for others.
Yeah. It's gorgeous.
Mm.
It's gorgeous. Immediately think of just the you know feminine and masculine bodies, right? Interior versus exterior. Recognizing that people of their own specific and worldwide persuasion may be shifting those bodies, you know, and I would say good process of shift, you know, like some of the research out of Gonzaga has been on, you know, trans movement of shifting the body, you
Mm.
know, and, you know, very powerful and obviously very traumatic of what people have gone through, you know, trying to, you know,
Do
change,
you mean
you know,
shifting the body as far as moving trauma out of the body, or what do you
no,
mean by
like
that?
actually sexually moving to become the opposite sex.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, and full change that way. And trauma, yeah, and the trauma part's obviously very, very important. But I think of like, you know, there's a if your gift of your body has been interiority, you know, the feminine body,
Mm.
it's exactly what you just read. I mean, that's right. I mean, that's one would be more comfortable if, for example, if my masculine body embraces the feminine depth of my life and my scientifically the XY chromosomal arrangement, who knows what it is? Mine's always been at least a little more feminine than most masculine people, you know. So, or maybe a lot more, you know, but you know, and it's just kind of natural stuff. Like I've always done kind of the clothing for our family and, you know, things that you might think of as, you know, cross stereotypical or,
Mm.
you know, the artistic arrangement of the way the family operates, you know,
Hmm.
which we might think of as more interiority, you know. Uh, but in any case, let's just take the physical for a moment. The blessing of that, you know, body that is interior is what you just, you know, reported, as well as many other styles of that. But it is sanctuary, peace with deep darkness,
Mm.
you know, love for the emotional depths that one, you know, that has an exterior body might be afraid of, you know. You see what I'm saying? Right? So
Yeah.
it's gorgeous how it helps us, you know, heal so many things that cannot easily be healed by the exteriorized body, you know. So, you know, the exterior, you know, is typically, you know, overexpressed with exteriority and underexpressed with interiority, you know.
Right. Right.
And the, you know, the interior is overexpressed with interiority and underexpressed with exteriority, you know.
Yeah.
So, you know, we might say of the masculine, you know, balance to that, which if anybody wants it, a great book on this is the I think it's called The Little Book of the Human Shadow by Robert Bly, who he's analyzing and kind of giving us Jung's shadow in a very poetic way in a very
Mm.
slim volume that's just an incredible read and, you know, keeps messing with your mind on all the different archetypal Jungian images of what, you know, for example, if a man in his crassness calls a woman a manipulative bitch, all that means is that he is a manipulative bitch and he has not
Mm.
swallowed his shadow and has not eaten his own humiliation. You know, well, that's important stuff to know. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And let's say a woman in her crassness calls a man a fucking bastard. That just
Mm.
means that she is a fucking bastard and has not eaten her shadow of being a bastard.
Mm.
You know, and you know, so it's very hard to face on one level, but it's also humorous and good to face, you know, on another level. And under safety and mentoring, it can be faced, you know, beautifully. Um,
Yeah, it's
and
very hard
you
to
know,
do this
yeah,
without mentoring
totally.
or some sort
I
of
think
guidance for
impossible.
sure.
I think
Yeah.
impossible.
Yeah, I agree.
And so, yeah, yeah. So that, yeah, so I
Mhm.
love that quote, and I love Carl Jung's work too. And there's just so many good ways, you know, to move these
Mhm.
things.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think, going back to, if you say, if a woman says a guy is a fucking bastard, and,
Mm-hmm.
there's goes back looping around to what we were talking about earlier about authentic love and how, on some level, one of those people or both those people have to find their way to forgiveness, right? To get to the
Yeah,
love that might be underneath there.
it's and that even that, right? That's been my primary field for the 35 years is forgiveness studies. And
Hmm.
even that is so counterintuitive, you know.
Mm.
So a little self-test would be how much do I think about forgiveness? And most people would say not that much. Why do I not think about forgiveness that much? Because it's painful. You know,
It's painful. And the
usually
ego wants
it's
to think it's all the other person.
yes, it's like just something that's hard to ingest if you haven't been, you know, like taught how to ingest it. Kind of like back to anything, you know, like becoming great at something, you know, a violinist or a, you know, my uncle was a state fiddle champion 5 times, you know. well, that was so many hours, like, and mentoring and learning little
Mm,
skills, picking them up all over the West, like all these little skills once you're decently skilled enough to learn them. And so it's just so much now. So that can feel overwhelming, but on the other hand, once you've got it, it becomes grace and ease. You know,
mm.
it's no longer like a huge uphill. Like it's so easy for me to shoot a jump shot. I don't ever have to practice again. Do you know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
because there's just been so many thousands and thousands of hours. But if you recall, learning anything at the beginning, like the first time my uncle played fiddle or first time his wife played guitar, it wasn't some great thing coming out of that instrument. So
A lot of jump shots were missed, right?
yeah, so if we take forgiveness, it's very counterintuitive. And then often people will do this thing with anything. Like people will look on, let's say they haven't learned, how to shoot a jump shot, and they will look on like, fans or whoever, why did you miss that? Da, 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 like, well,
Yeah, right.
if you really put in the time, you sort of understand more. And then, so it's like kind of like one doesn't even get to analyze it if you haven't put it in time.
Mm,
It's just back to crassness. It's just a crass thought that means absolutely nothing. Like somebody that hasn't
yeah.
doesn't even know what a jump shot is, critiquing a jump shot. And then let's go with people that know somewhat, but let's say they're 35% shooter, which most people consider a good percentage from the 3-point line.
Yeah.
That person doesn't really have the right to critique the 50% 3-point shooter. There's only about,
Yeah.
there's so few of those that ever have existed.
Yeah. Yeah. The armchair
Yeah,
coaches need to
yeah.
simmer
So
down until
forgiveness,
they put
yes.
it all
And
in, right?
so let's just take that for forgiveness because people do that a lot. Like,
Mm,
I don't want to forgive my father, or I should never forgive my brother, or this person that abused me, or you know what I mean.
mm.
And there's some truth to that, or I can never forgive that country that wronged me. There is some truth to that. It's just it's not among the deepest truths. It's what
Well,
I would call,
what would be the deeper truth
yeah,
then?
because those are what we might call the reactive beginnings of truth.
Hmm.
They're reaction based instead of more anciently based or sacredly based. So instead of thinking, should I forgive someone? Healthy people think, am I asking forgiveness enough? Am I making things right? Am I making atonement fully?
Mm,
Because that is so hard to do, to go to your loved one and make atonement, real atonement. You know,
yeah.
Anybody that's gone through AA and has any amount of sobriety knows what we're talking about. It is making amends is no joke. You know, and even if we look at AA, they don't say go out and forgive everybody. They say go out
Mm,
and make amends.
mm.
You know, and that's
Yeah.
just a higher. It's just a higher truth, a deeper truth. You know,
Yeah.
that I should be thinking, how do I go ask forgiveness and make things right in my life and as nations?
Mm,
You know, versus nope, I didn't do that. No, that was them or that was you. Now it gets tricky because certainly people, it's not anybody's fault themselves that they got abused by someone else. You know what I mean?
right.
It's just sort of the natural progression to, if we avoid it and don't, you know, consume our own shadow, that we will act out not the same as that abuser, but in, you know, some way similar or some way opposite, because we have not ingested the
Right.
shadow of humanity, including our own shadow.
Yeah. Well, that
So
speaks
yeah,
to,
yeah,
along that line is by not learning to forgive, not practicing forgiveness.
yeah.
What does research or your experience show? What do you lose
Oh
as,
yeah, yeah. That's so good because it's the research is so profound now. Back to the golden age of research on love, which also includes all these elements like optimism, gratitude, forgiveness, care, kindness. There's all this research, um, and it and think that research kind of came into the vacuum of a more nihilistic atheistic science that was convinced there's no God, no mystery, no, you can only
Mhm.
measure things that are visible. And of course, they were measuring things that were somewhat invisible: depression, narcissism, psychopathology, codependency. All the major things that you think of in our manual that we have as psychologists, the DSM-5, diagnostic and statistical manual of disorders, of mental health disorders. That thing's cool and necessary and helps people communicate as professionals between insurance companies and doctors, et cetera. But the counter to that would be the diagnostic and statistical manual of healthy, ordered life.
Mm,
And it would have in it, things like the fruits of the just what are called the fruits of the spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, self-control, faithfulness, self-control. Um, and that manual is now you could build one easily with the research on all those things,
Wow.
and the research is real. Every bit is real. It's everything that was being looked at negative. And the negative is necessary. It's not like, we don't want to cut that off. It's really important to know things about narcissism, especially if you're a narcissist or you're dealing with a narcissist, and, to watch out for, I think I'm dealing with narcissists.
Yeah.
Like I might be the narcissist, but in any case, it's always kind of counterintuitive a little bit. But so you take forgiveness research. Well, what's missing when you don't forgive, when a
Hmm.
person doesn't forgive? And I would say not just forgive, but more like build a life of asking forgiveness and forgiving. You know,
Yeah.
a healthy life. Certainly, there's a codependent life that says sorry to for things that they should not be saying sorry for, because they don't have an
Right.
identity.
Good point.
Um, but anybody with some amount of agency is more working on their own defensiveness consistently than even if they are codependent, because there's all these masks that stop us from that we build into our lives that stop us from actually just no, that was wrong what I did, and I need to ask forgiveness and go make amends and make things right. But back to
Hmm.
like how often do we ever see that and experience that? In the mature couples, that's multiple times per week. It's not like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm gonna wait for 2 years, and it's literally like, oh, that was, some are small, so they involve a smaller forgiveness asking. Others are larger, they involve a bigger plan, and we call that the ladder of accountability.
Mm.
Kind of build out, for larger. Obviously, if you think of things like genocide, that's among the largest. And what would a
Yeah.
legitimate plan of accountability look like? Well, we can look to the Shann for that, and South Africa for how they built theirs, Philippines for how they built theirs, Rwanda for how they built theirs. These larger reconciliation processes, and they're gorgeous. But down into what do people miss when they are not asking forgiveness or forgiving, or changing in good ways? Well, what the research shows is that people with higher forgiveness capacity have stronger self-esteem,
Mm.
stronger, significantly less anxiety, significantly less depression, significantly less um, heart disease, which is a really cool one. You know,
Wow. Yeah.
um, Significantly more personal well-being. So the things that suffer are we live in anxiety. And of course, we could call this the age of anxiety. We could also call it the age of a depression. We could call it the age of heart disease. And these are all like coming back to forgiveness motifs.
Mm.
Yeah, the age of fear, the
Yeah.
age of warmongering. Warmongering is just an obvious like non-forgiveness motif.
Yeah. 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 And then through forgiveness, you're gaining joy, as you
Yeah,
referenced, you're
all
gaining
those
joy and
principles.
love
Yeah,
and happiness and just
yeah,
feeling more content in
flexibility.
life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
much more agile and flexible and talented in conflict. You know,
Hmm.
yeah, you're not afraid of it or trying to dominate it or run away from it or being conflict averse or, like, yeah, it just gives a much more flexible freedom in life.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Much more beautiful too.
Yeah, exactly.
um, yeah. So it's like we just kind of all have to learn to swallow our ego, I think, is perhaps the first step in
I love that. I love what you're saying there.
forgiving and being forgiven, right?
That thing, like, the ancients had such a good grip on it, women and men, uh, from my own tradition, the desert mothers and fathers, but many other, traditions throughout the world. But and the grasp was something like one must eat one's own humiliation.
Mm.
It's just it's so
Oh,
good. It just sounds right, even if it's sort of awful to think about. It just is like, it just, to me, it just resonates as, yeah, that's the world. That's me personally. That's something to
mm,
try to beautifully, lovingly, give to my kids. Yeah, we're okay. We're okay with eating our own humiliation. That's a good thing.
mm. Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah. Warm it up, put it in the microwave, eat
yeah,
that
that's right.
sucker.
Mealtime, mealtime.
um, in these last couple of minutes, because I brought it up earlier and I heard you talk about it on another podcast, and it really isn't
Yeah,
doing it justice. But you were talking about little daily, weekly, yearly practices
yeah,
that
yeah,
people can
yeah.
do to move from that 48% terrible to the moderate to
Yes,
the 2%
yes,
awesome. And so
yes.
maybe just we can just start with a couple daily practices. And if people
Yeah,
want
it's
to hear
perfect.
more, they can go to the previous
Yeah,
podcast you were on.
yeah, it's great. And I was, my personality works that way. That's kind of back to the blend of the linear and the mystery.
Hmm.
I love the mystery, but and not but and the linear is really also very helpful. They're both really helpful.
Mm.
So the mystery is like, what is love? The linear is touch your loved ones 5 times a day in a loving
Mm.
way. You know, um, the mystery is beauty exists. The linear would be give legitimate praise, devotion, cherishing in your sentences 5 times a day to your loved ones.
Mm.
Each child, your spouse or your partner. You know, and when we say legitimate, it's good to say I love you, and sure that should happen at least 1 or 2 times a day. And it's also very good to say I'm so grateful to be married to you. You are a
Mm.
beautiful person. You are a beautiful person to be married to.
Hmm. Hmm.
Those kind of things will touch us right now because they're the right way to live. That's a
Yeah.
that's the right way to live. It's hard to do that if you're not, cleaning off your plate of forgiveness asking and changing, because the other person
Right.
might think,
There's
well,
resentment there. It's a
yeah,
wall
they,
between
they
you.
like, I don't want
Yeah.
to hear that,
Yeah.
and they're right if I haven't cleaned off my life better, you know what I mean? Like, once the threshold of like changing one's life and to the better gets reached, then they trust almost everything you're going to say to them, what I mean? But
Hmm.
if my living my life poorly, say I say something like that and I actively having 2 affairs and I just did coke in the basement and I slapped my kid yesterday, it doesn't mean anything to say that to the other person. It's even probably worse,
Right.
because now I
Oof.
am a double hypocrite. So, there's just the logic of life that we do need to know that. But once the threshold is reached, which I would say through mentoring, et cetera, then, people
Hmm.
really start believing in each other and trusting each other, and then it flows. And most people have, no, not most, but many people have that already. Like they don't have to like rebuild from the ground up. Some do. But others have already done a lot of good stuff, and they're not like actively, in some gridlock with their loved ones all the time. So they can start any of these dailies, anytime.
Yeah. Yeah.
If it's too large for those, I'm always like, okay, get mentoring as a family and as a couple right now.
Yeah.
You know,
Whether that's
get,
mentoring or coaching or
yeah,
a therapist
exactly.
or going to a
Yeah,
retreat or what have you. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, go take good action. And so yeah, those dailies, ask forgiveness a couple times a week. Um, have good greetings and partings. Um,
Hmm.
that's your partner, a 6-second kiss per day. Um,
That's awesome. I'm
the
just
thing's
gonna
awesome.
we try to do that in a six as much as we
Yeah,
can and a 6 second kiss a day. I mean that 6 second
incredible.
changes everything.
It
I'm
changes it.
not
It's
kidding.
like, and this comes straight out of Gottman's research.
Mm.
It changes everything. Instead of just a peck or instead of nothing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it just like reunites the bodies, the minds and the hearts and the spirits, of the two people. It's like a 20 to 30-second hug per day with each loved one. Um, yeah, those are some of the ones. I mean, it gets much more advanced from there, as far as like what to do. But
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Then
yeah, like,
we'll have
and
to
and
come
it,
back for
yeah. I mean,
episode
briefly, let
two
me
on
just say,
that.
let me briefly say the
Yes.
advanced part would be like the masculine owning the emotional depth of the coupleship, the feminine
Mm.
owning the sexual depth or intimacy depth of the coupleship versus chasing each other the other way. You know what I mean? And
Oh
again, this
wow.
could be this could be a gay couple too. It doesn't any type of couple.
Yeah.
For example, in our relationship, Jen is hard for us to tell. She's probably a little more masculine than I am. I'm probably a little more feminine than she is. So we're always working with these dynamics of what this might look like. But a man that's or a masculine that's owning the emotion based side of it is that the other person should look up and say, my emotional vessel of completion is beyond fulfilled by the way you relate to me, instead of like, oh, I wish you would do this or that. Do you know what I mean?
Mm. Mm.
And the feminine side, the other way, the intimacy vessel is fully uh you know complete, more than I would imagine. Not you
Yeah.
need to do this or that more. that's what we mean by owning it. You know what I mean? Like that the masculine and the feminine,
Yeah.
own
And I
things
would
deeply.
imagine certainly there's a little gray area there where both
Yeah, yeah.
people kind of
Both people are
switch back
doing
and
a lot of
forth.
both.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of both. It's kind of like, I guess what I would say of that research is it's just very helpful to sort of have owners of the patterns.
And I also love that it's the patterns that you would normally put on the other person,
Exactly.
or our culture would
Exactly.
normally put on the
Yep,
other.
they're totally
Yeah.
counter the other way, and not for the other person, but because that's what healthy people do. That's
Mm,
that's how they live. They're not afraid of, you know, the fullness of the counter expression, the opposite expression.
yeah. I love that.
Yeah,
Um, well, this has been just a wonderful conversation. I'm really glad I met Summer Stewart. And
yeah. I'm glad you did.
yeah, thanks
It's
again,
great.
Summer.
Yeah,
And
love you, Summer.
be sure to check out, I would highly recommend again, The Soul of Others, as well as his most recent novel, Shann's most recent novel, Where Blackbirds Fly. That just came out this last October, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Thank
Correct?
you.
Yeah. And just two, well, I'll try three questions and we'll see
Yeah,
how they go. It's kind of speed questions. Um, so the first one, and I kind of do this around my themes of my podcast. So I'm
perfect.
wondering if there is a hallucination or something that you thought was going to be one way that turned out to be something completely different that you really learned something from.
Oh man, there's so many. That's just such a great question. But
Yeah.
I had a hallucination that, um, and I grew up with a lot of fear, so I had a hallucination
Mm,
that fear would always be ever present to me.
mm,
So that's probably one of the biggest. And then what changed it was I met my future wife, and her family had practiced a lot of these things, and
hmm. You
even
mean the
in my,
forgiveness and that sort of thing?
yeah, yeah, and
Yeah,
loving
yeah, yeah.
authentically, and
Okay.
they'd done major work, and it was openly discussed, and like, so, but you just experienced it mostly. You'd come into the family, and so even literally like 2 weeks, I'm like, I need to hang on right now for the rest of my life. Like if I hang on to this woman, my life will be so good,
Mm, that's
and
that is
yeah,
beautiful.
and of course I was too scared and couldn't say, and it wasn't right timing to say anything like that, but it was just like really trying to, beg, plead with the divine, help me hang on, help me do this,
Mm,
stay with us, whatever the cost, and there were major costs because you had to, eventually eat your own humiliation over and over.
mm, yeah. Well, I just want to say and reflect, I love that you are this walking, talking, breathing example of growing up in fear, thinking fear is going to rule your life, and yet you have come through it and you have
Yeah.
learned from it. Yeah.
That's the beauty of it, is that love. Like eventually I looked up and I was almost never afraid anymore, almost never.
Mm, yeah.
And
Beautiful.
that just seemed impossible. Like, and now it seems impossible to go back to fear. Like it
Yeah.
just feels like, yeah, yeah, death or
The fusion has
pain or,
happened, right?
yeah, anything like that you imagine. Like, yeah, I feel fine. Yeah. I mean, I feel loved, deeply loved. I'm thankful I've
Mm,
had a chance to deeply love. It's okay, whatever happens, like
I love that. And by fusion, I meant the nuclear fusion you were
yes,
referring to
totally.
earlier.
Yes,
So,
that's great.
um, okay, question number two. What is something you have lost in the last year? And this could be good or bad.
Yeah. Wow. That's such a good one. A good one that I've lost is an over linear presentation of theology and spirituality.
Hmm.
So I've just been practicing a lot more non-linear presentations, like rather than some of the simple, ancient, beautiful meditations like breathe in love, breathe out fear.
Hmm.
I've been moving towards more things like breathe in mountain blackbirds, breathe out mountain bluebirds, breathe in mountain bluebirds, breathe out mountain blackbirds.
Mm,
Now, some of that it's very grounding. I've been shocked at how grounding it is to kind of use wilderness motifs in the meditations. Um, but that, and then of course that can be given to others easily. Jennifer might be sleeping. I might have my hand on her arm, you know, God or the divine, breathe your mountain blackbirds into her, let her
mm,
breathe out mountain bluebirds, let her breathe in mountain bluebirds. every that amount of blackberries. Of course, I'll pair that with, like, as she's sleeping or awake, I love you. I'm thankful for you. You're such a good woman. You're just
Of
basically
course.
giving blessing, like a
Mm,
lot in your life. And
yeah.
that just creates such a good dynamic. So kind of more, I know that's been part of my life throughout. And thankfully, I came into we had zero divine oriented tradition growing up, and we had a lot of hedonism and therefore a
Mm.
lot of fear, making. Because if you're just doing whatever the hell you think you want and it's not good, then it's not good for children. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
so yeah. Yeah.
anyone who has listened to this podcast will know how much I appreciate the weaving the wilderness and the kind of
Yes.
mystical and the power that is there. I mean, I completely agree, and the poetic that is there
Yeah.
to be experienced.
It's
Um,
awesome.
yeah.
It's awesome. And I would say the thing that I've lost, which is sad, is uh I thought at this age I would be better at, loving, anybody, my wife or my child in conflict, or three daughters in conflict. But that's still like way more eating of humiliation than I thought I should be going
Mm,
through at this point. And so that like thing is a loss of what I it's a return to always a return to humility, but and I think it coincided with like life hit us in
hmm.
three major ways as a family. And I just look up over the 2 or 3 years and go, I think they all would have a lot of love for me, but I just go, wow, I thought I would be just so much better at giving gentleness when we're in stress.
Yeah.
And I'm good at it when I get to it, but yeah, anyway, that's one that I'm
S-
like, man, that I'm working on that one right
Still
now.
working.
I
Yeah.
really believe it should be full gentleness in the midst of
Mm.
stress and conflict, totally. But yeah, I'm not there. So trying to get
Again,
there.
we all got to keep practicing, right?
Yep, yep, totally.
Yeah. And last question, what are you loving right now?
Hmm. Yeah, I'm loving Jennifer and Natalia and Tim and Isabella and Ben and Ariana, and these are the
Mm,
close in our lives. And I'm also loving just more there. I think I had such attachment to wilderness growing up that it has tremendous nostalgia and
hmm,
peace to it. And
yeah.
so I would say I'm loving surrounding myself with pieces of wilderness. Like my dad gave me this gift that he created of a bear skull with claws and a corona around it, and he kind of built it and framed it and everything. It's gorgeous.
Wow. Awesome. Well, again, Shann, this has been a wonderful hour, and I think I know I got a lot out of it. I would expect the listeners have as well. And yeah, thank you for your wisdom and your vulnerability and your openness and honesty and authenticity.
Scott, thank you for doing what you're doing. It's been a real grace to be with you today. And I
Mm,
appreciate you.
I appreciate you too. Thanks so much. And thanks to all you out there listening. On next week's episode, I will have Rachel Zerg join me, and she will be talking about her experiences with iboga, both the actual experience with that plant medicine, which can be quite long and intense, as well as how it helped her process and heal from some losses and heartbreak she had been going through in her own life. Very informative and touching episode. So be sure to tune in for that. And in the meantime, if you liked this episode, be sure, as always, to share it, like it, comment on it, all those fun things. And till next time, this has been Love, Loss, and Hallucinations.